Hi, welcome to Season 2, Episode 0 of Ludonarrative Dissidents. In this season, we are going to be looking at more than just individual games, although we are going to be reviewing RPGs as voted by people who back our Kickstarter campaign, which is underway right now. There will be links in the show notes. In this episode, we are going to be trying a new type of show where we are looking at game mechanics. In each episode, we will be looking at a type of game mechanics and sort of doing a survey of this game mechanic as presented in multiple systems. First off, we would like to thank everybody who backed Season 1 and also who's listened to Season 1. All of Season 1 of Ludonarrative Dissidents should be on our public mirror site on anchor.fm. Of course, there will be a link in... Well, if you're listening to this, it's on our Anchor site. Thank you for all the kind comments. And we've had a great time just talking about RPGs, but I wanted to try something new. And I thought this would be... game mechanics are always fun. Who doesn't want to argue about alignment systems? In this episode, we're going to be talking about card mechanics. Like in our review episodes where we have 4 questions about an individual RPG, we have some questions for this. And the first question is, how do you define this mechanic? So how do I define card mechanic? Briefly, I would define them as a system in a role-playing game that uses cards of some kind. Now, there are
it's hard to define it without using the word cards. It's like, you know, cards. You know what cards are. They're so basic that there aren't even really synonyms for playing cards. Or if there are, I didn't find them. Yeah.
And there are multiple types of cards that are used in games. James, how would you define being someone who has written a game with cards?
Yes, I've designed 2, possibly 3 role-playing games that use cards as a crucial part of what they do. I've loved the idea of cards in RPGs since the mid-80s. Ghostbusters, I think, was the first RPG I encountered that had a set of cards in it, but we'll doubtless come back to that later. Las Vegas, my self-published thing, uses a deck of tarot cards for basically to replace dice because it's set in a casino city. So what you do in contested actions is you play a version of blackjack using the cards, tarot cards. So obviously all the odds, all the probabilities are way off from what you'd normally expect. Mm-hmm. But you use the illustrations on the cards to kick off to spark inspiration for what happens in the narrative. You don't have to know tarot at all. You can use any tarot deck. And that works pretty well. I was never 100% happy with how it worked. It fits the idiom of the game really nicely. And then there's also a thing where each of the characters gets one of the cards right at the start, which it's called their signifier, and it says something about who they are within the world. Las Vegas is an amnesia game. I think I've referred to this in Season 1. And so you start off, your character sheet is literally blank. You know nothing about yourself except this tarot card and you describe yourself physically. You don't even know your name. And then other players can describe something about you as well, the stuff that you'd forgotten or didn't notice, like the big scar across your face or the dragon tattoo on your back or whatever it is.
Your fly is down.
You start off naked, so
great!
You dig yourself out of a shallow grave, and everyone's naked. So it's you're a blank canvas apart from this tarot card, and that works pretty well. I like it because it fits the Vegas idiom. I don't like it because it's not quite as polished as I like my work to be. Mm-hmm. The other one I designed was Paranoia, the Paranoia reboot, which came out the same year, which I think was 2017 or 2018. And that was an interesting project because the publisher actually came to us and said, we want this to be card-based. We want card-based mechanics in this. And we said, what, no dice? And they went, no dice as well. And I said, well, why cards? Well, because we're the publisher and we're paying you. So fair enough. And we did essentially a card-based combat system for that.
Mm-hmm.
And card-based equipment as well.
Yours is just to make it fly.
Yeah. Yes. But there are also decks of cards for your secret abilities and for your secret societies. And I think for equipment as well. within the game. And we'll come on to that, using cards as resources, cards as signifiers, that's essentially what Ghostbusters did. But we'll come back to that. And that was really fun. It was quite slapstick, because the idea of what we wanted to model was a combat that starts off and you think things are kind of under control, and it just spirals madly into just absolute chaos. Grant Howitt and Paul Dean were my co-designers on that, and if you know Grant's work, it's very Grant, the combat system. It's perfectly paranoia. That was really, it was a lot of fun to play test, and that I'm really pleased with the way all of that works.
Yeah. I think we'll talk about this more briefly, but like around that period, I noticed several RPGs using cards in optional, or perhaps like RPGs are susceptible to trends and fads as any other industry. So we'll talk about that. I think just one thing for me for defining card mechanics, it's almost always used in some way, or often used as a way of randomization. As opposed to dice, because role-playing games are games, and there is often an element, almost always an element of chance in role-playing games in order to create variety and tension and excitement. So, Greg, is there anything else left about defining them before we start?
Yeah, I was just going to. Well, I wanted to start with a warning that I am probably going to describe a game I designed and never got made. It's called Gates of Ivory. And yeah, if any publisher is listening to this and it's like, I can't believe this gem has been left to molder. It's almost completely done. There was a piece missing until we started doing this podcast, and I realized, I can fix the one problem that always nagged me about it by making it player facing. Boom, sorted. So yeah, I could dust that off tomorrow. But it was card-based and tarot-based. And so, to me, cards are, I'm like, everyone knows what cards are. They are these cardboard objects that you can fan them, you can manipulate them. And for tabletop role-playing games, it's usually tarot or a 52 Jacks and Kings deck, or something that is bespoke to the deck. And as James was talking, and as you were talking about, there was this little period where there were cards and games, and it was like a fad. I'm like, yeah, cards and tabletop role-playing games are like seem to have that one of those relationships where it's like they never really settle down and get along, but they never fully break up either. They just
it's kind of like 3D in movies. Like it comes and goes in waves,
it'll be back.
It will be back.
So I'm just waiting for them.
I don't think it's like that. There are no movies out there that rely on 3D to work. All right, apart from Avatar.
Guess what? Avatar's coming back.
Oh God, I know. And I was going to say I can't wait. I can wait. But there are a lot of the games that are based around cards, and even some of the early ones. The cards are integral. They would not work with dice systems. You can't just take the cards out and rely on the game to work.
Oh yeah,
without it.
I'm not arguing.
It's like
that.
Amber Diceless. You can't go, I'd like to run this with dice. It doesn't work. It's
Amber Dicey.
Some of them, yes, it's a little superfluous, but the cards, purely from dealing with cards, having a hand of cards, having cards to manipulate is very different to manipulating dice. The tactile experience on the desktop, they deal with randomness in a different way. If you've got a deck of 52 cards, you deal them out. You know you're going to get a number between 1 and 13 4 times. You roll dice 52 times, you've no idea what you're going to get.
Well, also, when you, with the cards, once you play a certain card, like the 6 of diamonds, and you put it in a separate deck, it's gone. Like, it's not like if you roll a 6 on a d6, that 6 is now gone. Like, so just, even if you just had 6 custom cards 1 through 6, once you take a card out, like, that changes everything about the probability and distribution. So there's a lot of changes, both subtle and overt. I think in general, in terms of categorizing them, we've been talking about there are 3 broad types of, there's playing card games, games that use playing cards, games that use tarot cards, and then games that use custom cards. Sometimes those custom cards are mapped onto 52 cards. So you can use playing cards as substitute, but each, like, the 6 of diamonds represents this. It's like a random table. But a lot of times they're, like you said, Greg, bespoke. And I think happens a lot. Like, there is a role-playing game, Warhammer Wrath and Glory, which was first published by the German Ulysses, but then Cubicle 7 took it, and they have a lot of optional decks of cards for, like, critical hits. Just pull a card from this deck for critical hits, or for player character psychic abilities, Perils of the Warp deck. But, like, it's entirely optional. Like, it's just, this is the trend, is like games from about that period, from, like, the mid 2010s to, like, the late 2010s, were kind of like, oh, let's add in some decks of cards as extra accessories we can sell. Like, it's cheap and easy and doesn't really change the game design that much. So
I wonder how much of that was a market factor where it's like, oh, it's really cheap to print cards now because all the card printing places are rolling in trading card game money. And so they've ramped up capacity. And with capacity up, now you can get a custom card deck made for pennies on the dollar, and it looks good, rather than having it, rather than the way it was pre-Magic.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it's more the transition to digital printing over traditional offset litho that made the difference. That made that you could do a much smaller run economically. The other thing, and why a lot of indie games started doing this, I don't know the exact date, but I would guess about 5 years or so ago, is because Drive-Thru RPG started offering a bespoke card printing option, which they're running with the Game Crafter. And you can do one deck of cards economically. It's not going to be ridiculously cheap, but it used to be, you wanted one deck of cards, that will be a 4-figure sum. Back in the Hogshead days, we were looking at doing card-based games and stuff, and it was just, no, this is not affordable in any way.
Just don't want to take out that second mortgage.
It's, well, I mean, if you look at a lot of card games in the early pre-Magic, first edition Once Upon a Time, which is not a role-playing game, but is a storytelling card game, which I'm intimately involved with. The first edition of that was printed on regular cardstock. Not laminated, not playing cardstock at all, just regular cardstock. And it was difficult to shuffle, and it was difficult to hold in your hand, and the cards have square corners. And it was unpleasant, but a lot of games did that, because that was the only way you could make it affordable.
That definitely has, the material conditions being a lot easier to get these kind of components into players' hands. The print, I imagine have changed a lot of game design. I have been looking at a lot of like itch.io games. I've been like going through bundles. Get 300 games for $5 to support this charitable cause.
Can we just salute Itch for doing that and for making that so easy? They have raised so much money for so many good causes. It's amazing. Also, if you're not on those bundles, get on those bundles. My God, they're good deals.
Yeah, Wonder Home and a lot of other really great games have been in some of the recent ones. But I've been looking at a lot of the no-name games and a lot of the like 1 and 2 page games, and like a lot of games are using. There is a preference for using like plain just playing cards, just like, and also just like regular D6s for as components as what you need to play the game. I think there is sort of a tendency for the indie and storyteller game designers to like make it more accessible by having easily available components, as opposed to like fancy dice and custom card. Print out this custom card. Like there's a lot of like print and play card games, but like that requires a lot of effort to do. Yeah.
Unless you're either gonna have them be chunky or flimsy or sleeved, and none of those are great.
Unless you're playtesting something, in which case you're a lot more motivated than the average player.
Unless you're a maniac like us. We've touched on the economics of it, but so how are they used in existing games? All right, I got 4 different ways. One of which I'm not sure I've ever seen actually used, but I just thought, hey, that would be neat. So what I've got is the dumbest, most obvious way that nobody uses is draw and drop, right? We've got a deck in the center. This is going to be our randomizer. It's a 2. And unless for some weird, perverse reason, you just really wanted there to be that you wanted that weird card curve and non-recurrence rather than rolling dice, I'm like, yeah. This was used really well in The Quiet Year. That's because there you've got a drive for randomness, but also non-recurrence. So, but for the most part, trying to make cards be dice isn't great.
That system does work if the cards aren't simply numerical values or even suit values, but if each card represents something, as with The Quiet Year, where you draw the card, you refer to it, assuming you were using a standard deck, then you go to the table and you find out what that card refers to.
Or the Everway Fortune deck, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Their non-recurrence is definitely a feature, but
yeah. Also the Beast, which I'm going to talk about later on.
Yeah. If you've got a 52-card deck, you've got dual axis on, you've got your suit and your number. And this is also with the minor arcana in tarot cards. So for this game, Gates of Ivory, that I was talking about, I'm like, okay, you got 4 stats. They're the 4 suits of the tarot. You're statted 1 to 10. If you play a card that is lower than your stat, gives you a temporary stat boost. If you play a card that's higher than your stat, you go to that. So even the weakest person can occasionally have that 10 result. And this is, gives you 2 kinds of information, and also allows, and this is a little more of why it's used, but I'll come back to it. But it's tactical deployment, right? You can't roll a bunch of dice and say, okay, I'm going to save this 20 for when I really need a 20. You take what you get from the dice. They are full chaos agents. But when you have a handful of cards, you're like, I'm just going to waste this 2 on this. This is not an important outcome. I'm going to blow the 2 on it, suck up the failure, but set myself, get a better draw. So that's an option, is you can be very tactical and strategic with cards. On the other hand, you can use them to be super duper right brain and fuzzy and magical tea party creativity stuff. One of the uses in Everway is when you are making your character. The way you make a character in Everway is you have this giant pile of art cards, and you just look at them and you're like, I am drawn to this image of a young woman with a llama, and that's going to be my character, is Llama Lass. And, and now I'm looking at this one of the guy holding the tomahawk, and he has 6 fingers for some reason. And so the 6-fingered man is part of my character backstory. And now here's a picture where it's raining fire, but it's not like a destructive fire. Everyone's just okay with it. Cool. That's where I'm from. And so you are exposed to all of this non-scientific, non-numerical, non-specific, non-backgrounded data and stimulation. And the creative part of your brain starts running to keep pace. And you're like, well, how can I categorize these? How can I put these together? Why would people who lived in a land where it rains fire raise llamas? Well, and so it unshackles you from expectation. So that is one thing that I really loved about Everway. It also uses it. You've got a fortune deck in Everway, which is principles like, you might draw a season, you might draw an error, a type of archetypal error like the soldier drowns in his armor, or striking the dragon's tail where you've underestimated a threat, or it could be, there's I'm going to be moving house, so my Everway Fortune decks are all packed up. Otherwise, I would refer to them. But this is the sort of thing where, you know, in an encounter, you're like, okay, I'm going to deal with this guy. I don't know how things are going to go down. And the GM pulls a card and says, well, this is the auspice under which this is occurring. And now you and the GM have to figure out what that means. And so it's very search for meaning oriented, or can be done in a very search for meaning oriented way, rather than a let's emulate physics with graphs way.
Yeah.
So the other idea I had for use in existing games, although I guess this is use in games that don't exist yet, do you know of any games where you get cards and you lay them down like tiles, like creating maps? Because I'm like, you know, you could lay it down like Magic the Gathering, where, oh, okay, I've cast this spell and now we know that that's happening. Or, I mean, imagine a combat-heavy game where as you're playing, you're building the environment. And
kind of a tableau game.
Yeah.
I'm not actually aware of an RPG that does that. I'm sure there's something on itch, probably several on itch.
I do know that there are like custom card decks that are like create a dungeon. Like each card is like a dungeon, like geomorph, where you can like rearrange and like lay out the cards, and like this is a hallway, this is an intersection, this is like a collection of rooms. So you can build a dungeon through a deck of cards. There's several projects like that, like Deck of Dungeons, which is was kickstarted a while back.
I see it with a superhero game for some reason, where, you know, it's like, okay, this is we start the fight in this room, but when I throw him through the wall, here's what's behind that. You know, it's a warehouse, so he lands on a forklift. So now there's a forklift in play, and, you know, oh, well, you know, out the window, there's a dumpster for me to land in. You know, here's a busy road so that if anyone goes into there, that's dangerous. And that I can see having, I'm like, oh, so if you've got a power that's movement based, like Spider-Man jumping around all over the place, that would let you have a bunch of those cards where you can control the environment, or if you're hyper fast. And whereas if you're just Cyclops, it's like, oh yeah, instead of a bunch of environmental cards, I just have cards that blast damage. Boom.
Yeah.
So yep, there it is.
I think I've seen similar things in some of the essentially RPGs on a board. The board games with you know, that have heavy RPG influences but are fundamentally board games and are designed to be played in a single session, where you build up a tableau of powers and you can advance those powers. I'm struggling to think of a specific, partly because I don't play many of those games.
One. Gloomhaven, which was it's a very big board game. I played quite a few sessions of it. And they actually they have cards for building out the dungeon on tiles, but they also it's entirely card based. There's no dice rolling at all. And one of the ways they use that is, and you could do this with the custom cards in the way you get a deck of tiny cards that have numbers on them from like -2 to +2 usually. And there'll be like 1 -+2, 1 +2, some zeros, some -1s, some +1s. And those are essentially your attack rolls. And you would draw a card, and that's what you would get to hit, and you need like a +1 to hit this monster. That's how much damage you inflict on the monster. You inflict +1 your normal damage, or +2 your normal damage, or -2. And they use the cards in a clever way, because as your character improves, levels up, you get choices on how to modify that deck. You could remove bad cards, or you can add good cards. And so like some of these cards would not just give you better numbers, give you like status effects. Like if you're like a ice wizard, you could like have, oh, well, now whenever you draw this card, you inflict +1 damage, but you also inflict the ice, the frozen status on the enemy. So there are RPGs that, but that's a board game, but like it is an RPG like board game, because you level up your character, and there's an ongoing story and a campaign.
There's a bunch of those. They essentially take their inspiration from computer games like Diablo. They are combat systems in a dungeon. They're not, and yes, your character grows, but they grow in power, not in terms of personality. And the story is usually pre-written. Random things can happen. Your character can die, and you have to start a new character. But the vast majority of the story is pre-written, and you're essentially following a linear story, sometimes with branches. It is not role-playing as we intend to talk about it, how we mean it in the context of Ludonarrative Dissidents.
Mm-hmm. Although I'm sure there are still people playing Gloomhaven who, when their character dies, shriek, "No, Blackleaf!"
Oh, yeah. It's the same as playing... there's a not a first-person shooter, an isometric shooter where you're shooting aliens on the PC, and people get enormous... It's designed that your characters will die after a certain amount of time. People get enormously attached to them.
I know there's a lot of like permadeath video games like that, but like if you die, you lose everything that your character had. So, but yeah, in terms of role playing games, one thing we've talked about systems that like use cards very heavily, but there are some role playing games that use cards as they use dice as the main randomization method, but then there's this one or a couple systems that use cards as for this one thing. For example, Savage Worlds uses dice, but they use cards for initiative. And in the initiative system, every a wild card is a player character or like a named enemy PC in NPC. Draws a card, but if you have special abilities, edges, you can draw additional cards. Allies, act on the player initiative. Extras all work as a group. And basically whatever you draw is your initiative. But if you draw a Joker, you get a bonus. The GM starts the round by counting down from ace down to 2, with each group resolving this action when its card comes up. And sometimes you can keep that secret, or so you don't know exactly who's going next ahead of time.
Ooh. And
ties are resolved by suit. Spades are first, then hearts, then diamonds, and then clubs. And everything else in Savage World is dice-based, but for that one thing, they use cards. Now, that's interesting. Yeah,
I think, isn't that because Savage Worlds is based on the Deadlands engine, which was also had a very similar card mechanic, as I recall in the dim distant past. But it was idiomatically appropriate in Deadlands because it was poker. It was, you were cowboys in their version of the Weird West playing, poker or gambling. But it worked well, so it's carried over into the Savage Worlds system.
Yeah. I do know that one of the player character types in Deadlands was called, I think, a huckster.
The hucksters. They were card-based wizards, and you had to gamble against otherworldly entities. So anytime, and I only played first edition Deadlands one time, but I remember, the huckster's doing their thing, so the rest of us, everything else just kind of takes a little pause. It was like in Cyberpunk, where it's Netrunner's doing his thing. Everyone else, bathroom break, get your cold drink, take a little stretch.
I never played Deadlands, so I don't know exactly. Did the huckster actually use playing cards as part of that?
Yes, they played poker.
Oh, okay. Was it like a hand in order to determine if they got a power up or something?
I think you had to get... this was ages ago, but I think it was that you had to get a specific hand or better to get the effect you wanted.
Listeners may be able to discern that we don't actually rehearse Ludonarrative Dissidents. We just kind of make it up. But I've never played Deadlands either, to be honest. I did read it back in the day, but at a time when I was reading a lot of role-playing games, so I may have the details confused.
Although it does remind me, there is another Western RPG that I have skimmed through. I've skimmed through it at con shows and things. Aces and Eight. This is put out by Kinzer Company.
Shane Ivey loves him some Aces and Eights, if I recall correctly.
It is an extremely dense book. It is one of those bullet-stopping kind of hardcover books. The thing about it is, one of the things I know is that the way to determine hit location is through what they call a shot clock system, where there's an overlay of the person you're shooting at, their silhouette, and whether they're behind cover or whatever. And then you draw cards to determine where you actually hit. So like there's
you aim. There's a clear template, and you aim at you position like the center of it over, like, okay, I want this to go right into his left eye, and then it gives you a result. And if you get a good enough result, it's like, yep, left eye. And if it's not good, it's like, oh, well, no, he clipped his ear. Oh, well, no, that's just a miss. That just went into the wall behind him. Mm-hmm. So I can see where if you want real emulation, if you love some emulation, I can see why you'd love that.
Yeah. I do know, they even include entire systems. Like, it's a very dense system in terms of its subsystems. Like, there's special cattle, rules for moving a large herd or for doing some cattle rustling. There's including gambling where you just play cards. Like, it is.
Why would you not?
Why would you not? Exactly. And, a lot of stats for horses. But I don't see that a whole lot in terms of like this RPG uses dice, except for this thing which uses cards.
It is general. Well, okay, I can think of one. Whimsy cards. This was what I came up with for why it's used. And if you're unfamiliar with whimsy cards, they are they're old, and they had a series of just sort of generic plot developments on them. Like someone unexpected shows up, or the weather changes violently, or my favorite, someone falls in love. And the way we used these, I remember the wonderful use of these in Jonathan Tweet's original Over the Edge games was at the beginning of the game, you would get a handful of like three or four of these plot twists, and you could play them at any time. And the rule was, if you played one of these to help your character, great, the card's gone. If you play it to make things more interesting for somebody else's character, you draw a replacement. And so now you are motivated to screw your neighbor, because if you have a card that is bad, you're like, oh man, I gotta ditch this and get something that'll save my life at the final fight. So, sorry man, you just slipped and fell. Oh, sorry, I guess you're drunk, Angela. And, and it'd be like, okay, what am I gonna, he falls in love with me. Suddenly he can't bring himself to stab me because I'm too delicious. So, and this is why, I see this as something you can't do with dice, because dice are just numbers, by and large, and these whimsy cards were very specific texts that had no numerical value, but were just plot developments. Mm-hmm. And the thing I said before, with cards, you choose when to deploy it, as opposed to with the dice when it happens when it happens.
The three things we just talked about, the Savage Worlds, Aces and Eight, and Whimsy cards, are also all things that like are not incredibly. They take time to resolve, but like they're things that don't happen all the time. So like Savage, Initiative, you do that at the beginning of combat and then it's done. You don't do combat all the time. When you do combat all the time, you actually hit somebody. But in a combat focused game, you kind of want some tension there. And then whimsy cards are dealt at the beginning of the game and then come up sporadically. So I think card mechanics a lot of times slow down play, and that's not necessarily bad because it gives you time to pause and think, and like you say, you deploy them strategically.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, that was another one of my points, is that, or actually it's for how does it affect play, is it makes planning and deliberating and bluffing possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but sure, are we into why is it used now?
Well, I've got a couple of other ways of how it's...
You've got more. You're still back on. Catch up, James. Come on.
As stuff, to represent stuff. I mean, we're going way back to, I think, 1983 and the AD&D monster cards here, which I think is based on no research other than personal memory. I think is the first time that role-playing games and card games or cards dallied together. And they were literally, each card was a AD&D monster with the monster's stats on the back. You could buy them. You didn't get the whole 300 of the cards in the monster manual. I think they came in decks of 30 or 40. I could be wrong. I had a couple of them. But the advantage of that is that if you're running a scenario, either one that you've written yourself or the one that you've bought, and you know that 4 or 5 monsters are likely to come up in the session, you can just have those cards in front of you. You don't have to put your bookmarks in the monster manual. You don't have to be flipping between pages to get to it. And it was all right. It did not set the world on fire. But, and this is what we did with Paranoia, and in fact, it's also what the Ghostbusters game, which I mentioned before, did. Ghostbusters had 2 or 3... I forget exactly how many sheets it was. And this was, I mentioned cards in the 90s. A lot of them were just die cut on regular cardstock. In the 80s, these cards came in perforated sheets and you had to separate them yourself. And you couldn't, you cannot shuffle a deck that's set up on perforated sheets.
They were the worst. We're so spoiled now, and we deserve to be. We deserve these nice things.
People don't know they're born. So, yeah. But most of what the cards in the deck were, they were your character sheets, NPC sheets or PC sheets if you wanted to play the characters from the movie. But then there were equipment cards. And it was all the standard stuff that you'd expect. You could get, a proton pack and your PKE meter and a copy of Tobin's Spirit Guide. And some non-standard stuff like the bullhorn, which allows you to be louder than anyone else, but there were 2 of them. I love that. And a card just said beach kit, doubles fun at beach. No further explanation required. Ghostbusters, I can talk endlessly about the Ghostbusters game. It is a work of absolute genius, and the fact that it's, because it's a licensed game, you can't buy it anymore, except at ruinous collector's prices, is a crying shame because it is so good and so funny.
Never seen it, never played it, never touched it, never read it.
I've seen supplements for it for sale at Gen Con, I think I have one of the supplements, but I've never seen the main game. It was actually written by Sandy Peterson, Lynn Willis, and Greg Stafford.
Yeah. It was. That's the thing. It was developed by the Chaosium crew.
Holy.
It was
so it's
edited,
like... Yeah. This is like one of those 70s super groups.
Yeah.
Edited by Greg Costikyan at West End and published by West End. It is a super group. It pays off. It is that good. So you get all these equipment cards, and I think the game just says draw 3, and you've got them in front of you. But they can get destroyed, or if it's a one-use item, you hand it in at the end. And I think that's so. But again, you don't have to look stuff up in the rulebook, and then you get games like what we did with Paranoia or Warhammer 3rd Edition. A lot of the Fantasy Flight role-playing games with cards. Where the cards represent stuff that is in the rulebook, but you don't want to waste the session flipping through the rulebook, particularly if there's only one of them. You've just got it in front of you. It's much more accessible. It's much easier. You know immediately what your character can do. You know what each of the spells can do. You know what all the equipment can do. And it allows the publisher to sell decks of cards, which, of course, ramps up their profit margin. But it changes the dynamic. Suddenly you're not focused entirely on a character sheet. You're focused on actual stuff. And as I said, with Paranoia, this is what we did not only with equipment, but also with your secret society. So you knew a bit about your secret societies and your mutant powers as well. So you knew the details of your mutant power. And I think each mutant power was unique. So you knew you didn't have the same mutant power as anyone else, which worked quite nicely.
That's cards being cards.
So that is not dissimilar. And then there's one other example I want to use where we're talking about using them mechanically, which is just using cards for combat. And again, delving slightly back into history, there's Lace and Steel. I don't know if you guys know Lace and Steel. It's an Australian game from 1989. It is. This is another one. It's a work of rare genius. It is still available. It's $5 on drive-through, which is a fine shame for what it is. $5. It was a box set originally, and it's set essentially. It's the Three Musketeers in a fantasy world, but it's not elves and dwarves fantasy. It's centaurs and satyrs and fairies fantasy. Artwork by Donna Barr, which is just glorious.
Donna Barr. Why do I know that name?
The Desert Rose. Was her big comic, the one where it was the gay Rommel comic. At a time before there were many of things like that. Yeah. It's the game is a hoot, but quite apart from the setting being lovely and the rules being lovely, it has 2 or 3 decks of cards, and you play, because combat is almost always sword fighting or magical duels or repartee, verbal dueling. You use cards using a similar system to fight these things. And it makes combat very special somehow. Tactical, interesting. It's not the greatest system mechanically, but then you're not looking at it as a standalone game. All it has to do is carry the atmosphere of the game and create the right game effects, which it does. And this is 1989. This is pre-Castle Falkenstein, which a lot of people think of as the first role-playing game that used cards effectively. And Falkenstein is lovely as well. Fantastic fairly early Mike Pondsmith stuff, just gorgeous. But Lace and Steel, if you've got $5 burning a hole in your pocket, well worth a look. The decks of cards used to be on drive-through, but I think you now have to download them as JPEGs or PDFs or something. But anyway, yeah. But those are free download at the moment. Paulie Kidd is the designer, Australian designer. Absolutely very, very underrated. Working on a new game that I haven't seen, which is also card-based, and I know very little more about it. Very little about it than that.
Yeah, I think the virtue of having cards in sort of like as gear or options, and like a lot of role-playing games, especially the more complex ones, there's this sort of like, you get so many abilities and skills and talents and feats and spells and items that you lose track of them or you forget about them. But if you boil everything down to like a handful of cards, you can remember what your character can actually do far more easily, as opposed to like, I'm a 10th level wizard in D&D. I have 28 spells available at any given time. I can only cast 1 per round, but like I'm going to forget about a lot of them. And but
why did you not save me with Poison Ward? Oh man, I forgot I had Poison Ward.
Exactly. Shit. Yeah, it happens a lot, and I think that's and also with cards you can do trading. You can like I said, discard. And certainly with combat too, especially in a game about dueling. It sounds like for Lace and Steel, like that you either win or you don't, and there's a very like you have to make a choice, and it's very granular. It's very granular as opposed to like, oh, I lost 8 hit points, darn.
No, I mean, you can have dramatic, the cards have numbers on them. I don't think they particularly have effects. I think there's kind of, a few sort of moves, but there aren't things like, I rip your sleeve open and, send your wig flying. That's not there. That was, like I say, this was a game from the 80s. We weren't, it is extraordinary.
We weren't wig snatching yet.
Yes. Yeah. Wig snatching came in 1994, I believe. No, I'm just talking balls as usual.
No, I mean, there are, like you mentioned, Falkenstein is like the first sort of card-based RPG. Now,
I think the first one that a lot of people were aware of.
Yeah, it was certainly,
first one anyone cared about.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly did well enough that I've seen it in stores, in the used section, obviously, but like it is out there as a game people are aware of. But there's still like RPGs being made that are entirely card based. I actually worked on one a couple years ago with Upwind, which was written by Jeff Barber, who designed Blue Planet. And it's sort of high fantasy, like airships. It's literally like there's just floating islands. There's no like continent per se. Use skyships to get everywhere. So it's very anime kind of Studio Ghibli fantasy. What its gimmick, well, not gimmick, but sort of idea was, instead of rolling or using cards to determine every facet of the encounter, like initiative and then attacking, before you did anything, you would set the stakes of an entire encounter. Like, you're fighting some bad guys. Okay, well, I want this to happen by the end of the fight. Well, the GM says, well, okay, well, if you fail, then this will happen. And it's not like you're dying. You would like, oh, the GM says you get wounded and you lose your sword and you escape, but barely. And then you would make a play
as a thing that could happen.
Yeah. Well, it depends. So you can make like the player says, oh, I want to do this incredibly awesome thing. Well, okay, well, if you fail this incredibly awesome thing, then the stakes will be higher, or I'll set the difficulty higher. So once the stakes are negotiated, then each side plays 1 to 3 cards. The player has 3 cards if it's one of their best abilities, or 1 card if it's one of their worst abilities. And they have a hand of cards. They actually have 2 hands of cards, 1 for their magic and 1 for everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone actually has their own deck of playing cards. And the GM uses 1 to 3 cards based on the difficulty of the encounter. 1 if it's easy and 3. And then you just flip your cards at the same time and count them up. Whoever has the higher number wins the encounter. And then there are rules to like assisting players can throw in 1 card. And so the GM can sort of like determine if it's going to be very hard or very easy by like, I can choose which cards in my hand I get to do. I can get rid of my shitty cards, or I can drop down some high cards to really make it a challenge for them.
Put the fear of God in them.
Yeah, exactly. And so it plays very differently because, again, they said, we're going to determine the entire encounter in one go. But the system is very interesting. I'm being very brief with its description because it uses suits, it uses numbers.
There's lots of different angles you can wring meaning out of your randomizer with cards. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like, your designer is well aware of that.
Yeah, and what I found interesting is that everyone has their own deck of cards. So as opposed to everyone sharing one deck of cards, I'm not sure if too many games actually do everyone. Yeah.
So. Well, okay. Can I natter about Gates of Ivory again?
Oh, please do.
Because one of the things I wanted with that is that, okay, so you're going to have a hand of cards, and you use the minor arcana for normal stuff. Mm-hmm. If you are a wizardy type, you also draw cards from the major arcana. And the way I've got it set up is like, okay, you're going to study 1 major arcana, and you can play any arcana card to get like the kind of twerp version of that effect. But if you have the actual card, it's like, oh, I know the Empress I have Empress energy. So I can play any major arcana to get the little weenie Empress effect. But if I have the Empress card, I can play it for the giant kaboom Empress effect. And so what this does is the mechanics themselves give you your wheezy, distracted wizard, because if I'm playing a wizard, I want to have most of my hand full of major arcana cards so that I can pull my Empress effect when I need to. Or if I have several effects, I'm like, I can power any of these and have an increased chance of getting the big one. But that means I have fewer cards for my everyday effects, for, my swords effects and cups effects. So that I thought that was a neat bit of self-balancing, along with your hand. In this system, your hand is your hit points. So as you take damage, your hand shrinks, and when you drop your last card, you can no longer act.
Oh, that actually happens in Upwind too. Like when you lose
parallel evolution.
Your hand size decreases. So exactly. It's a really fun game. It's really interesting to design adventures for. Yeah.
That or Barber is reading my mind. And Jeff, if you're reading my mind, stay out of there. There's stuff you don't want to see.
One side effect of do an entire counter at once means you get through a lot more story in one game session.
Yeah. I imagine.
Yeah.
As you were describing it, I'm like, I bet that just clips right along.
Yeah, so you could do like Masks of Nyarlathotep as a campaign in like five sessions.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I've got one more, which is one of my unpublished card games, Cop Show, which is it was going to be a Hogshead release, and we couldn't make the numbers add up because this was like 2002, and card printing was financially very different.
I remember you talking about this, only the working title was Put Your Trousers on Your Nick.
Get Your Trousers on Your Nicked, which is basically it's pretty much the opening line of The Sweeney, the seminal British 1970s cop show. And it was it wasn't a game about being a cop in the 70s. It was about being a cop in a cop show in the 70s and the 80s. And it was a single session campaign game, but each game was an episode of the TV show, basically. And your character sheet was the character generation. I've forgotten this. The character generation system I lifted entirely and dropped into the Paranoia reboot. It's the Paranoia reboot, which is the one where you shaft. Every time you take an ability, the person sitting next to you gets the same ability, but as a negative. So if you're good at something, the guy next to you is bad at it as you are good at it.
Nice.
And everyone else then can't take it because they're just average at it. So you get a group with strengths and weaknesses, and it works incredibly well. I was so pleased with that.
Are you familiar with character generation in Best Friends, which is not card based? So I'm digressing, but
I'm not.
So this is Gregor Hutton's game from a million years ago, but I loved, and it's about being a group of girlfriends, right? Not romantic girlfriends, but girls who are friends with each other. And character generation is you've got the list of the other girls' names, and you're like, I am jealous of so-and-so because she's better than me at X. Mm-hmm. And you just go around saying the things that you're jealous of each other, and that's character generation. So if everyone agrees that so if 4 people are playing, and all 3 of them say, I'm jealous of Janice because she's richer than me, then Janice has wealth 3. And, 0 nice. In intelligence and everything else. And so I just thought it was a lovely way so everybody's ranked, and everybody already has that mean girl energy going in.
That's great. I'll have to get a copy of that. I have most of Gregor's stuff. I don't have that one. But the mechanic of Cop Show will Get Your Trousers on your neck. There's a deck of cards, basically, and each card has a cliched Cop Show action, like skid over the bonnet of the car, fire pistol from behind open car door, drive through pile of cardboard boxes in alley, that kind of thing. And also a saying, a cliched saying, which can become a catchphrase. And the way it works is you start off with, I think, no action points. So your first encounter with the bad guys, you are going to lose. You are going to fail. But every time you can play one of these cards by doing the action on it or saying the thing on it so that it fits what's going on, you get to flip the card over and it becomes an action point. And the mechanic is quite simple. You will fail at an action. You succeed at any action that's reasonable to do unless you are going up against the bad guys, in which case you will fail unless you pay an action point, in which case you succeed. It's a very simple, very narrativist system, but you've got to bulk up your action points by playing the cards as you go through the game. And creating this sense of being in a 70s cop show because you're running
absolutely
go. That's the game.
You absolutely have to not be creative.
Well, you have to work out how to fit these things into the game. Have to engineer yourself into a situation where you can crash through the plate glass window in a believable way. That kind of thing. The cards there absolutely drive the mechanics. They're very, they're at the heart of the game, and they create a lot of the game effects, and they create the narrative as well, which I don't think it overlaps with some of the things we've already talked about, but isn't quite the same.
Right. The card flipping in particular, I think we haven't really talked. There's not a lot of games that involve like flipping cards, which especially if you're using custom cards, that's double the card. There's a lot of things you can do with that. Yeah. Yeah. As a brief aside, your mention of Ghostbusters actually reminded me of a game I played once, the Bullwinkle and Rocky role-playing game.
Never seen a copy of that. Never, ever.
They're actually not too expensive on eBay if you're looking for them, but they have story cards to help to determine like what of the pre-designed plots you'll be playing through. And interestingly enough, uses spinners instead of dice for random numbers. And was actually
how very 18th century.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, it was actually co-written by Warren Spector, who became a video game designer for a number of legendary games, including Deus Ex, Ultima Underworld, Thief. System Shock. And so, yeah, another like sort of like kids light boxed RPG from the 80s, written by one of the all time great.
He did Toon as well. He did Toon for Steve Jackson.
That's right. Yeah, he did. So yeah, very very interesting.
What I'm gathering from this is the route to all financial success is by designing licensed property kids RPGs. That's the winning move that turns you into a superstar.
I mean, look at Avatar. Avatar did very well. For their Kickstarter did what, $10 million, $11 million, something like that.
Oh God, yeah.
Cards, I think, like we've talked about, like some things where like cards are just things, accessories to help sell the game.
Right?
Yeah,
they're and then, shiny.
Yeah. But at their best, card mechanics add depth and like a slower pace, because I think a lot of RPGs get into like, let's just roll dice. I rolled a hit, I rolled damage. You rolled a hit, and then you roll damage, and then I roll number. But like cards force you to, the players, I think, to like consider their options and really focus it on like a small number of options, but are strategically
interesting and meaningful.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think that's the cards at their best. I don't think every game obviously that uses cards uses them in that well, but like I think
it's like the loudspeakers again, Yeah. And they can't all be the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Role-playing games fundamentally use dice, or at least began using dice, because they derived from war games, which also used dice. I mean, that was where that came from. And it's only more lately that war games some war games have started using cards and done them to great effect. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think it's a point that was worth making.
A lot of war games now use cards as well. Like one of my friends is in Warhammer 40K, the game, and they use cards for help determining missions and special abilities. Like you draw your from your mission deck to determine like what kind of mission you're going to be fighting. So you don't even know what the objective is until you get to the table. I think a lot of designers now realize cards, like, because the economics have changed, like now designers are integrating them into games.
I could use these. Yeah. Maybe I will.
Yeah.
Yes, it's kind of in a way that games would previously have probably used random tables. But cards are a lot more interesting, and you can fit a lot more information on a card.
Yeah.
In a much more accessible and interesting way.
Like one of the games, speaking of random tables for cards, like one of the games I saw on the latest itch.dot bundle is the Mystery Creature of Claytonville, Pennsylvania. And the idea is it is meant to emulate like the genre fiction about like a weird small town where there's the Mothman's doing some shenanigans, or it's Twin Peaks or Gravity Falls, or like something bad's going on in this town.
Mothman shenanigans, or as we call them, Mothmannequins.
And it's a storytelling.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's a game for up to 7 players, and it's a storytelling game about creating the entire town and the protagonist instead of the GM and everyone else is a player in the small town. Everyone sort of has a hand. So it's more like the Quiet Year in this regard. It's sort of like more, which we did talk about, and does use cards, in fact. But like they have a saying to create the town. For the first step, you create the town. You deal 5 cards out, go around choosing a card, and then you answer that question. So with 5 players, so if you draw a red, you look at the town table. If you look at black, it's about the creature. And so like a red 4 is what better days has this town seen and why are they long gone? And a black 4 would be who was the first person to encounter the creature. And then if two people get a red 4, like then you can answer the question again, but go into more depth about like why is the town what better days has the town seen? Why are they long now gone? So like you can elaborate on it. So that's a way to use cards as a random table. And I see that a lot now. Like another one that I did recently read was Raccoon Sky Pirates, which uses random cards, playing cards, as like, okay, this is this complication. You get 3 of them. And you can play them to succeed at a task, but make everything more difficult for all the other raccoons on your skyship.
So you screw your neighbor.
Yeah, so you screw your neighbor.
We're back to whimsy cards and the joys of screwing your neighbor. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's nothing new under the sun. Like, if you think you come up with an original game mechanic, I think that's maybe the main theme of this is like every game mechanic possible was developed in the 70s or 80s, possibly by Greg Stafford.
And you just haven't seen it yet.
You just haven't seen it yet. But yeah, I think I'm kind of curious about like what kind of games have done it badly. I mean, maybe we're just kind of self-selecting for the good games.
Well,
like,
I mean, yeah, as soon as I play a bad game, I flush it out of my mind and I'm like, well,
you can learn so much from bad games. I used to
learn how to be sad.
I used to have a huge collection of really, really bad role-playing games.
Oh, God, no.
Including Spawn of Fashion and stuff like that. Which is not as bad as it's supposed to be. It's just inept. One can really learn a lot by going, okay, I understand. Don't do that. Or I understand how I could fix this and how I could make this better. It's a really interesting design discipline to look at broken stuff and work out how it could be fixed.
Yeah.
That said, I can't think of that many games that fluff cards really badly.
I think the sort of commonality is like every card mechanic we've talked about has been significant. Like it's not something to do like draw a card to figure out how much damage you do when like you do one. If the enemy is 100 hit points and you're drawing playing cards to do damage to him, like that would be
you're gonna be there for a while. Yeah,
you're gonna be there for a while. Yeah, everything is like consequences. Yeah.
If you're going to design lazily, you're not going to use cards because you're just going to retread what everyone else always did, which is dice. I'm sure if there's an alternate universe where cards were the primary driving force of role-playing games from their inception.
Gygax was a huge bridge enthusiast.
There it is, and where all where a lot of mediocre stuff is card based. Yeah. So we just didn't have that because if you wanted to break with tradition and used cards, you were probably motivated to try and do something innovative.
That's true. I mean, I guess probably there are some of these RPGs out there that I know, like one of the editions of Warhammer Fantasy uses a lot of cards, custom cards. Yeah, third, I think. Yeah. And I've heard mixed things about it, but you hear mixed things about every big RPG out there. So I don't know how truthful they are, but certainly it seems some of the RPGs out there that use card decks, custom card decks, are just trying to sell accessories, which it is a business.
That would be the royal road to beefing it. Would be, I want these not because of their mechanical effect, but because of their marketing potential. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then have rarities. Mm-hmm. So we want it to be like Magic the Gathering, only a role-playing game.
It's worth pointing out that before Magic the Gathering came along, cards were kind of a very disregarded area of gaming, of the gaming hub. There were a few card games out there, but Once Upon a Time launched at the same Gen Con as Magic in 1993, and you could probably count the number of card game launches there on one hand. Mm-hmm. I can think of one other, which was another fantasy game where you kind of wandered around a forest. and maybe a couple of others, but it's a long time ago. But Magic just transformed the landscape, and suddenly people were into cards, and retailers in particular, and publishers understood that cards would sell, particularly cards with lovely art on them. And the quality of artwork on cards has just got better and better and better and better. Till these days. I mean, how many fantasy artists were there in the early 90s? People who made a living doing fantasy art. Really not. If you weren't working for TSR at the time, it's probably, or doing book covers.
Yeah.
That was it. Those were your two options.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary, the transformation of the landscape. And a lot of those people are doing card art because there is a massive demand for it. You only have to look at the big living card games that come out of Fantasy Flight. Huge numbers of cards, regular demand for artists to work on them. And they are glorious. They are just absolutely beautiful. Depending on your personal value of beautiful, obviously, the Eldritch, the Arkham Horror stuff. Not everyone's taste in beauty. Greg, I imagine you're all over them. But
those old Magic cards from Anson Maddox, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, just a point. People really like cards. People like buying cards. Cards are fun. They're fun to hold. They're fun to manipulate. Fun to remember. They have an appeal. Dice. The appeal is similar but different. The tactility is different.
Dice are tactile. Cards you gawk at.
Yes.
I would say like cards are much harder to design for in a lot of ways because when you're doing a dice-based role-playing game, you know what the probability of your mechanics are. You should know what the probabilities are pretty early on, and they're going to stay pretty fixed. But like when you're dealing with like a deck of 52 cards and like the player's drawn 8 and then they get to add 1 or they get to discard 5 and they put, like at any given time, it would be impossible to keep track. It would be very hard to design a game where you understood the probability of like Upwind. Like every player has their own deck of cards. They draw a different amount of cards based on whether they're wounded or not. The GM draws cards based on these circumstances. Like it would be very hard to figure out probability at any given segment of play
for the GM too. The players, if I've got my own card deck and I'm not worrying about anyone else's deck, I can probably have, even just a very baseline intuitive mode. I've seen a lot of red cards, and probably the rest of the deck is going to be a lot of black cards, and and adjust my tactics accordingly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not impossible. You don't have to be Rain Man to do it.
That's true. But thinking about designing card-based RPGs, or not card-based per se, but using cards, there is a trend in computer RPGs of using cards. There's a whole category now called deck builders. Slay the Spire is a very popular one, and the idea is all your abilities are cards, and you build a deck of cards to represent what your character can do. And that's what your treasure, that's what your loot is for killing enemies, is you get access to better cards.
I've wasted so many hours on that.
Yeah. So it would be interesting to see if any tabletop RPG tries to emulate that, because the problem with that is that, a video game can have infinite number of cards and give you new cards and take away cards and like handle all the probability and shuffling everything else like that. That's a lot harder to do in a tabletop environment. Like,
yeah, I think they have. I think you talked about it earlier on. I think essentially it's Gloomhaven, which I've not played, but I have watched, and it appeared to be like playing Diablo on a very, very, very slow computer. But a lot of the deck builders, they go back, the digital ones go back to Hearthstone, the Blizzard game that derives from the World of Warcraft background, but is a deck building game on screen. And Blizzard did what Blizzard always do. They took inspiration, and I choose my words very carefully there, took inspiration from another market-leading property, in this particular case, Magic the Gathering, because it's how can we do a successful CCG with our property in entirely digital, and it's made them probably billions of dollars by now. World of Warcraft, of course, famously is clearly inspired by a love of the Warhammer universe, to almost meticulous detail in some places. But what Blizzard did, I'm being very careful. Originality is not Blizzard's strong suit. What their strong suit is polish, because my God, their stuff is polished. It's so good. It's so brilliantly balanced. It's so brilliantly designed to be engaging, to suck you in. My story with World of Warcraft is I was a games consultant at the time I got sucked into it. And I came down with what I knew was a 3-day flu. And it was like, okay, this is brilliant, perfect timing. I'll download the World of Warcraft demo. I will play it solidly for 3 days while I get over this thing, and which will teach me all I need to know really about the World of Warcraft, so I can speak knowledgeably about it. Mm-hmm. And then then I'll just delete it off my system. 2 years later, I'm running a guild. Cory Doctorow was in my guild at one point. It's because his wife was a long-standing member of the guild. I was speaking about it at conventions and conferences. Yeah, I got sucked in. I did not want to get sucked in. I didn't mean to, but they are really, really good at that. Yeah. And yeah, it's a very hooky mechanic, that style of, move forward in not only in the narrative, but your character becomes more powerful. You get more interesting kit, more interesting stuff. You can represent that with physical cards, or you can represent it with digital cards. Doing it with digital cards is a lot cheaper. Pound for pound. Yeah. But it's the two fields feed off each other so much, the digital and the physical these days. You see mechanics from one cropping up in others all the time.
Oh, for sure. And so I'm looking forward to see what comes about next, what kind of what card-based RPGs or what games that use cards. Because there's a difference between card-based and just having card mechanics.
Right.
But I'm looking forward to see what comes next. There's a lot of potential in just 52 playing cards, deck of tarot cards, or custom cards. Any final thoughts, Greg?
I did have one. This was another one of those, I don't know that anyone's ever actually done this. It's on the idea of arrangeability, right? Mm-hmm. And what I thought of was, who played Robo Rally? I mean, men of our generation surely remember Robo Rally.
I've seen it. I've not played it.
The deal with that,
I've never actually played it.
Yeah. Oh, the deal with that, it was a board game, and you had a robot, and so you had to give it a string of commands, and so you would stack these cards together, and it's like, take 2 steps forward, turn left, take 1 step, turn right, fire your laser. And so you were trying to thread through this maze, but everyone else was always going through the maze at the same time. And you couldn't change anything once they started to move. You had to give them all their instructions in the stack, and you could get, if your thing got hit by a laser or fell into a trap, you'd lose cards out of your stack. And so now you're not even doing what you planned. You're doing part of what you planned at random. And so I'm like, man, imagine a game that's based on, say, a big battlefield thing. And it's like, okay, both generals have to stack up their orders, and then you just play them out simultaneously, and they come together, and you can't change and adapt. You just have to watch the tragedy unfold. I think it could be a very evocative sensation of helplessness where you're like, oh, I can see how they're set up, and yet I know that my next move is cavalry charge. Shit, they write poems about this.
The Charge of the Light, 600 robots. Yeah. That's sort of as an aside, the idea of we've talked a lot about the link between tabletop role-playing games and video role-playing games, but board games and role-playing games, the sheer interesting variety and depth of board games that are out there and now and the mechanics that they have, that RPGs don't really touch on as much, it seems like.
Because people who design role-playing games can afford board games, and people who play board games aren't designing role-playing games.
Yeah. Maybe it's
I'm sorry. That probably sounded a little bitter, huh? That probably.
Board games do be expensive.
You can pay a lot of money for them. That's all I'm saying.
Gloomhaven is like $100. So
that was more, I think.
Yeah, I bought it at a Kickstarter, so there was only $100.
I also bought the Kickstarter, and the thing arrived, and I opened the box, the outer box. I looked at it. I went, I will never, with my young family at the time, I will never be able to do this justice. We got 3 sessions. No, we didn't. We got 4 sessions into Pandemic Legacy Season 1 and never got forward with this. Yep. And I closed up the box and sold it at a small profit on eBay.
Yep.
That's my experience with Gloomhaven. There are two games I want to bring up, one of which is a pure card game, and one of which is a pure card solo journaling game. And, in the last 5-10 years, the definition of what is a role-playing game has exploded, and we now have so many things, and you only have to look at some of the bundles on itch that we were talking about to look at the sheer variety of what people are coming up with, to greater or lesser effect. Some of them are brilliant, some of them are brilliant and unplayable. But The Beast is a game that came out of Poland, I think, about 5 years ago.
This Beast.
Do you know The Beast?
I do not know The Beast. Tell me about The Beast, James.
I believe The Beast is 50 cards.
Okay.
We nominated it it's shortlisted for the Diana Jones Award a few years ago. But the idea is it's a deck of cards. You take off the first card, you take off the last card and put them to one side. You select, just at random, 30 cards, shuffle them, put the first card on the top and the last card on the bottom. And then you draw 1 card a day, and that is a writing prompt for your journal. And the first card always reads, I have sex with the beast, it's a secret. And then and there's a list of prompts actually run through in the game about defining bits about the beast, what its skin feels like, what it smells like. And it's clear that the beast is not natural in any way. And so you write this down in your diary and you wait a day, and the next day you turn over the next card and it will be a question or usually a question about something that happens, or an occurrence, asking you for your reactions, and you journal that as well. And you do this for a month. The final card brings the relationship between yourself and the beast to a, I use the word climax advisedly. It culminates anyway, and then the game is over. You put you close the journal, and you are advised to either hide it or burn it, for obvious reasons. And it's not the first solo journaling game. I don't know what that is. It might have been De Profundis, because De Profundis does have rules for solo journaling stuff, but I'm not sure. But the Beast is just, it's so out there and so demands so much of its players, and it's really clever, and takes you places that you were not expecting to go in a really interesting way. And because it's 50 cards and you select 30 of them, you don't know, even if you've been through the deck, you don't know what order they're going to come up in, you don't know what you're going to get, you don't know what you're not going to get. That's really nice. The other game I want to talk about in terms of what role-playing games can do potentially with cards and stuff like that. And I talked about Ghostbusters. I think there is a role-playing game out there that uses Xena cards. Did Conspiracy X use Xena cards? Xena cards are
they would.
The 5...
I'm like, that sounds really on brand.
I'm sure I came across a role-playing game in probably the mid-90s that used Xena cards. Xena cards are the ones that you see at the start of the Ghostbusters movie, where Bill Murray is shocking a student for failing to
read his mind. Yes,
yeah, read his mind. It's the one that there's a star and a wave and stuff like that.
Star, square, circle, wave.
Conspiracy. There's a listing on RPG Geek for Conspiracy X Xena cards. So yeah.
Okay.
Wow. The deep pull. That was I had no idea.
So the game I'm thinking about, The Mind, does not use Xena cards, but it does take play of a straight card game in a direction that I've never seen another game do quite so interestingly. The Mind is very simple. It's a deck of cards 1 to 100, and you deal round one.
The game is called The Mind.
It's called The Mind. It's by Wolfgang Warsch, Warsch, who is one of the up-and-coming big stars of the German game scene. He's got 2 nominees for the various Spiel des Jahres awards this year. Quacks of Quedlinburg is probably his best known. He's fantastic. The Mind was a fairly early work, but it's cards numbered 1 to 100, and you play it. It's a co-op. You play it over a number of rounds. Round 1, you each get 1 card. Round 2, you get 2 cards. But round 1, you've got 1 card. You each pick up your card and you look at it, and what you have to do is play them face up in the middle of the table in number order, lowest to highest, without communicating with each other. Except with looks. You can't you can't say anything, you can't knock on the table a number of times. You cannot give any indication of what the number on your card actually is. You just have to kind of sense what signals you're getting from other players. And you describe it, and it sounds like nothing. And you play it, and it's like, I played it a couple of weekends ago with one of my kids and a couple of first school friends and a couple of Ukrainian refugees who their kids' school is giving places to. And, they had pretty good English. But at the same time, it's clear that their culture was not our culture. And there was a moment, as early as round 3 or round 4, where we had a sequence of cards and people were just playing 62, 63, 64. And we look at each other and go, how did we know that the cards in our hands were 1 apart? It is extraordinary. It's the closest thing to ESP within a game that I've ever experienced. It's not. It's about tactical pauses and learning your other players' behaviours. But it's really interesting. And I would love to see people take something like that and use it within a narrative structure, such as a role-playing game. I don't know how. If I did know how, I'd have done it. But I'm throwing that out there as a challenge. There are interesting things coming out of the card game world that role-playing games, I think, could run with and could do something really, really interesting with. And if you can think how to do it, please go and make $1 million. It's any set of cards numbered 1 to 100 will suffice if you've got one lying around. If you've got 6 Nimmt or The Game, which is an earlier. I know it's a game called The Game. It's people have not. I know, and that got Spiel des Jahres nominated as well. That's not all of Wolfgang's.
I have played that before. It is a lot of fun. My friend Caleb Stokes has it. He's really into board games, so he's played it.
I really like The Mind. It's one of my favorite games.
If you could do it too much. If you could figure out how to basically Dread was to Jenga as the mind, Jenga's to Dread as the mind is to blank, blank, blank. Yeah, fill in that blank, and you could have the next Dread, which is a very successful game.
I think I mentioned I turned it down for Hogshead. I was offered it.
Yeah,
I know.
If you
so it has unknown armies. I know.
I was gonna say, wow. Also, there was this band called the Beatles.
They published Nobilis, and that wipes.
Yeah, that'll get you credit. That extends your credit pretty much indefinitely.
Thanks for listening this far. if you are, please check out our Kickstarter campaign for all the rewards and what role-playing games we will have available for you to vote on. We'll be doing voting a little differently. So we'll do it as one round, so we'll know what all the games are we'll be reviewing after we finish the campaign. But we'll have some great RPGs. Our list is still being finalized as we record this. We don't quite know yet, but there'll be some really good juicy games to talk about, and also a list of game mechanics for you to vote on, for us to talk about, whether it's initiative systems, alignment, injuries, dice pool.
I would love to talk about alignment. Everybody wants to hear about alignment.
I hope we do get to talk about alignment. I mean, I want to do we talked about we couldn't think of any bad systems, any bad implementation of card mechanics. I can talk about some bad alignment systems, let me tell you.
All right.
I'm looking at you, Palladium. That's right. I'm calling them out.
Wow. Just speaking the name out loud, like saying Haster.
Are you familiar with the Palladium alignment system? It is.
I am not. So you're not a fan, huh?
It's just dumb. It's just can you compare your entire morality to one of these types of movie characters? Are you a Han Solo or Luke Skywalker, or are you just a serial killer? That's about as Shades. That's how.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
no,
I designed for Palladium, and I have erased that entirely from my memory.
Oh no,
I did see something into my brain.
Yeah. So so hopefully we talk about that. But we'll let the backers decide. Of course, all our episodes will eventually go public. But backers, we should have a way for you to have a private RSS feed, so you can download them automatically as they are released instead of having to manually download them early. And
working on that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's please let us know what you think, and we'll all hopefully talk to you a lot more in the future.
That's the dream.
Yep.
Looking forward to it.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
And we're out. Okay, I'm back. We had a brief technical difficulties thing there, which I'm sure Ross will seamlessly knit together so that the only sign of it is me saying this now.
Unless I cut that.
Oh, to lose one of my diamond words that falls precious from my lips into the waiting ears of our hearers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to think about where the hearer's head is.
How dare you?